Hi everybody, I'm Lacy Schoen, founder of Real Women, Real Success. Well, we've been talking a lot lately about giving and how giving precedes receiving and how building reciprocal relationships are so important. I've mentioned quite a bit about that topic in How to Increase Your Influence. That's the 40-minute training that I gave to all my email subscribers, and we talked about it, how to build your influence and how to get the support you need through giving and building relationships, and that's so, so important. Today, though, I want to talk about the other side of giving, and that's how to know when you're giving too much. You know, it's important in the workplace to build solid relationships, and we don't get to pick the people that surround us oftentimes. And it is a very valuable job skill, as you all already know, to learn how to deal with difficult people, with people who have character flaws, with people who don't support us. Because when we're in a position where we're being paid to do something, as long as we're cashing the paycheck, it is absolutely an asset in our pocket to behave consistently like we are giving of ourselves and contributing our full professional potential while we're being paid to do that job. And so, you know, there's times where we can't help but give because it's our job to do so. To exceed the expectations is to become even a better valued professional. So we're always going to find ourselves in situations where we have to give to people who surround us. But I want to explore today, since we've been talking about it, the more strategic side of that, where you're building relationships and giving first in order to build a reciprocal support system for you to advance and reach your goals. And that takes time. We've talked about how much time that takes. But sometimes you get to a point where you're unsure if the relationship you've built is actually mutually beneficial, if there's sort of a return on investment, an ROI on all the giving that you're doing, because let's face it, women are innate givers and we have that strength and that talent. Sometimes we give too much. And so what I want to talk a little bit about today is, how do you know when you've gotten to that point where you are just giving too much, where it's taking part of your soul with it, where it's not reciprocal and you're not feeling that there's that balance in the relationship where there's give and on both sides. I don't want to say give and take, because take is not a good term. Both people should be balanced in their giving. And if that hasn't occurred after a substantial investment on your part, then I think you want to explore and go through a thought process of, is this relationship worth maintaining? Am I getting the benefit out of it? And you want to take that even as far as looking at your complete job, the package that you find yourself in. Are you contributing more than you're getting out of it? Even with those dysfunctional people, you might be learning a lot and you might be gaining new skills to take it to the next level, that it's important for you to stick around in that environment, but it's a thought process that it's important to go through. So I want to explore today some of the ways. How do you know? I have a list here. I'm going to be referring to my notes. How do you know when you've gotten to that point where you're just giving too much, and to maybe not in an overt way cut off the relationship, but to know when it's time to fade away or focus your efforts on a different relationship that's more productive for you? Of course, the first thing to think about is, are you getting a return on your investment? How much time and effort, how much of your heart do you put into this relationship? And do you feel that you are starting to get that back on a consistent basis? Does the other individual treat you well? And when I say treat you well, not only face to face, but in your absence. Sometimes you find out someone's supportive because you hear another person share with you something nice that they said about you. If you're going on years of a relationship and you've never heard anything like that, that's interesting, and I would think about that. Conversely, I think we've all had this situation where we've heard that someone has said something nasty behind our back, which is very much a grade school behavior, right? But it still happens, especially among women. So think through if someone is actually treating you well. Do you trust this person? And if you are not sure, ask yourself why you're not sure. Another thing that you can look at is, does the individual that you're assessing your relationship with, how do they treat others in their absence? Do they have maybe some character flaws where they tend to talk about people in their absence? And this is not a situation where you have a confidant or a mentor or someone where you need to talk through kind of some of the ugly things that people do to try to get advice and think through it. This is someone that maybe you don't have a relationship, that type of relationship with, and do you find that they're just always talking about others? If I know someone that is continually talking about others behind their back, then chances are I'm one of those people when I'm not around. So think about that. Do they exhibit calculated or passive-aggressive behavior? One of the things I experienced is individuals that will praise me significantly one-on-one, but not publicly. And, that can be an oversight. What you want to look for is patterns of behavior. Give people the benefit of the doubt. If they missed something or they could have supported you or reciprocated and they didn't, maybe it's worth a conversation to ask the question. But if it's a situation where it's a habit, where you're continually getting feedback privately that you don't get publicly, or if there's passive-aggressive behavior where something is occurring that maybe you thought was a little weird or felt calculated or intended to hurt, but maybe if you go to that person, they say, oh no, I didn't mean it that way, and it's just a one-time thing, great. If they continually say, oh, I didn't mean it that way, and it just seems odd, it probably is. It's probably some sort of passive-aggressive behavior and a sign that you're dealing with someone that has insecurities or control issues that they haven't gotten past. And we talked about in another video how sometimes when you come across people like that, they can be the most brilliant people. They can be very successful, but there's this insecurity or this baggage or this control issue or this even ego issue that they haven't dealt with to become whole themselves, and people around them pay for that. So you can look and see if that might be something that's a regular characteristic that keeps them from reciprocating. If they're an adult and they haven't gotten help with that kind of behavior yet, they probably aren't going to. So that is something for you to consider. When you go out of your way and it isn't noticed or appreciated, that's a sign that you might be giving too much or giving to an individual that is not going to reciprocate. One of the things I often talk about, even with my kids, is the idea of cutting jokes that are brushed off as just that humor. I find that there's no place for cutting jokes of another person that you have trying to have a supportive relationship with. I think, someone once told me it's the throwaway comments that mean the most, and sometimes those really mean a lot. They're intended to cut down and then swept under the rug as though they were just a humorous comment. If you find that there's a habit of that, if you find that there's a pattern, you're looking for patterns, then that's probably something to consider in terms of a person that may not be able to reciprocate your investment of giving back to you, or giving to them and giving back to you. Do they seem apathetic? Sometimes people are just apathetic. Maybe they've gone as far as they want to go, or maybe they just want to hold their position currently and they don't see value in reciprocating support. If they're apathetic, then that's a sign that maybe you're giving too much, or maybe need to focus your giving attentions on another individual. Do they allow you mistakes? People who are reciprocal givers allow mistakes. They understand that we've talked about a real woman is real. No matter how successful, she says, I'm imperfect. I made mistakes. I know I certainly have. And a person who is able to admit their mistakes wholeheartedly and not have their self-esteem infracted upon by that is also someone that will cut others slack. So that's another clue for you. Again, if you notice insecurities, if there's someone who just needs constant feeding with reassurance or needs constant feeding with regards to being in control, then they're going to have a hard time reciprocating to you. And if you notice that, then some of us maybe have had bosses like that in our past, and you have to deal with that. That's one of those difficult characteristics that if there's something still in the job for you, then it's worth figuring out how to deal with that while you have to. But if it's a choice on your part and someone you're trying to build a relationship with, that's not a productive relationship. That's dysfunctional. Mutual respect, of course, is important. And anytime you don't feel respected, it's good to see if you can find a way to bring that up and ask if that was their intention. Because sometimes people do things by accident. Again, you're looking for patterns of behavior, not one-time slip-ups. Do they get what you're trying to accomplish? Do they get you? Are they starting to understand you? And is your bond drawing closer, or is it remaining stagnant? Is it all fed by you, or is it mutually fed? That's another sign that you're giving too much, is when you both aren't mutually feeding the relationship and it isn't growing closer. Do they keep score? There's a lot of people that keep score, or maybe they'll say, you know, you didn't do this exactly the right way, so I'm not going to support you, even when it's clear that there's good intent or there's an accomplishment there. That is something that you can't typically overcome, and a sign that maybe you're giving too much to this individual. You know, one thing that you can really look for is, are you giving to a person that holds themselves accountable to certain behavioral and ethical standards? Do they share with you, hey, you know, I saw myself going down this path the other week with this employee or with this partner, and I caught myself and I really had to question, does this meet with my values? And I did a course correct on my own self. Do they talk about themselves and their own growth as always reaching to a higher level of integrity? If that's the kind of person you're dealing with, that's probably a good person if they're actually walking the talk, because there are those that say all the right things and then don't actually follow through with their actions. So that's the next one. Are they someone that says the right things and then follows up with their actions in terms of supporting other people, in terms of giving, in terms of trying to make the world a better place or the workplace a better place or your particular field a better place? If they're that kind of person, probably worth giving to. We talked about takers. Here's some signs within yourself that you're giving too much. If you're starting to feel angry or resentful, if you're really tired and you just feel like you're giving so much and you're not getting a return on that investment, if there's that imbalance, look for that. You know, if you're cranky all the time, or if you feel like you just don't have time to rekindle the fires in yourself and your own well-being, that's a sign. And there's all kinds of health issues that can crop up when you're feeling resentful or tired or giving so much and just not getting a return. You can feel that way about your job. You know, I have just recently made a decision to move on from my job. My giving to that environment outweighed what I was getting back from that. And now I'm going to focus all my attentions on helping women succeed and building a community of women supporting women, because that gives me so much more. And I finally worked myself into a position where I can do that. So it's so important that if the job isn't nurturing and giving back to you, that you set your sights on plotting a course to your next right move that will be more nourishing for your soul. And there's a lot more energy in that. And, you know, I wake up in the morning to make these videos at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm excited to do it because I'm passionate about your success and women in general succeeding and using their innate skills to succeed. And so it's easy to wake up at 3 when you are surrounded by negativity or something that doesn't feed your soul or your forward trajectory. It's a grind, and you can start to resent that. So those are all checks within yourself. So, you know, take some time to assess the reasons why you're giving to a certain individual. I talked about in several other videos being strategic about it, building your support base based on mutual benefit. And again, not being insincere about it, but women are givers. And I'm just simply saying, channel that with authenticity to a place where you can get some reciprocal benefit out of it, because that's what helps you build those lifeline relationships that you can lean on when the chips are down, or when you want to advance, or when you need a sponsor that says, yes, this person, Lacy, is good for this. I would recommend her for that. Or I want her in this leadership role. That's the kind of support that you're looking for. And if these relationships aren't going in that direction, then they're not worth giving to and maintaining. So how do you bow out of a relationship like that? You know, not hostily. You want to be a complete professional. You want to hold yourself to a higher standard. You know, whatever your higher standard looks like. So for some people it's Jesus. For some people it's, you know, Gandhi, whatever it is. say to yourself, what would this and such person do? Or what would my highest self do? And conduct yourself in your exit of that relationship just how that would dictate, that higher self. And sometimes it's a fade away. Sometimes it's just the relationship's outlived its usefulness. It doesn't have to be a hostile ending. You can just fade away gracefully. Sometimes you can actually cut it off if you want to. If there's some need for you to do that, I would always advise, though, that you really think through how you do that. You know, most often for me, I have noticed that I have relationships for a season. There's only a few in my life that have been enduring over a lifetime, and that is because I'm a growth person. And you may find this too. If you were growing and growing and growing, then sometimes the people who supported you before will only support you to a certain point. I have found that people who like Lacy 3.0 maybe didn't like Lacy 3.1 or 0.2 or 0.3. And that is because they're uncomfortable with your growth. And they may not want to get to know the new and improved you, the growth you, maybe because they're not a growth-oriented person. And that's a sign that you want to find some real close associates and friends that are growth-oriented like you, so that as you grow and change, there's support for that, there's sponsorship for that, there's cheerleading for that, there's support in giving each other a backbone when it's times are tough. So contemplate that. You know, one of the things that you might find is once you've moved on, sometimes people realize the loss and suddenly they're back. In personal relationships, certainly this is very much a thing that happens where someone has it in the relationship, there's something that isn't working, and they move on. And then the person who wasn't reciprocating is suddenly back. You see this in abusive relationships, you see this in dysfunctional relationships. It's no different with professional relationships. The same thing happens. Sometimes it's legit, sometimes it's not. Just be on notice that sometimes you will be valued after your departure. Sometimes you will be valued after you're no longer giving to the individual with which you were trying to build a relationship. Just because they come back or they recognize that is not necessarily a reason to go ahead and start giving and reciprocating again. It always needs to be strategic because you're important. You have to come first. Giving is a reciprocal thing. It's not something that should suck the life out of us and suck the energy out of us. It should be mutually beneficial, and that's where we're trying to get. When I'm talking about giving first, that's what we're trying to develop, is that mutually nurturing relationship where each party is helping each other and there's a balance there. And I want to say again, if there wasn't a balance there, just remember, if it's a character issue, if it's a pattern of behavior, don't go back. If it's a personal relationship or professional, doesn't matter. Dysfunction is dysfunction, and someone who is willing to mistreat another or who has issues that they can't get beyond, that typically doesn't change in adult life. So do yourself a favor and really assess if you go back to a relationship that hasn't been nurturing to you. It's probably not a good idea to go back to it. If you can remember two things, balance. You're looking for balance when you're giving. And on the front end, there's an investment. There's an investment of time to get the person to understand you're worth investing in and that you really mean what you say and you really are sincere about reaching out to them and wanting to build a relationship. There's an investment up front in that. But if it doesn't build, then it's probably not for you. I want to encourage you to also think about the balance of relationship. As a bank that you both deposit in, you have a bank account, the other person has a bank account. And when you give, you're making a deposit in that person's account. They call it a love bank in many relationship books. In fact, if you want to read a great book, His Needs, Her Needs is a great book for any couple, whether you're a male-female couple or a same-sex couple, doesn't matter. What it's really about is how mutually beneficial relationships are built upon each of the partners feeling loved and cared for by the other. And that's valid in a professional relationship too. Feeling cared for, feeling nurtured, making deposits into that bank. If you think of it that way, that you're both making deposits into your bank to benefit each other, that is the most productive kind of relationship that you can have, and that's what you're striving for. The last thing I want to say is anytime there's self-sacrifice involved in giving, you really have to assess, am I making an investment or am I spinning my wheels and sucking the life and energy out of myself to no avail? Really put yourself first, not in a selfish way. You can only do good in the world when you're healthy. You can only advance in the world when you're in a good place mentally and when you have healthy relationships. So make yourself come first, and always remember that sometimes we can give too much. And what you want to do is sit down and assess if it starts to feel like a relationship is getting to that point, that you sit down and think through, is this a relationship that I want to continue? Because you are gold and you are worth having. Only the best relationships, but only you can manage that. So I hope that was helpful in terms of knowing when you're giving too much. Giving is absolutely integral to your success and to building those lifeline relationships you're going to need to achieve your goals. But it's also something that we need to monitor to make sure we're not taking it too far and giving to people who are not going to reciprocate, who are actually maybe undermining us, who aren't growth oriented and who aren't helping us succeed, because again, it's in our nature to give. So sometimes we can overdo it. And I hope for you that you assess when it feels like that's happening so that you can get to a better place and be healthy and strong in yourself to move forward towards your goals. I welcome questions and comments down below. Give this video a like or a don't like. I know it's a little long. This is an important topic for me because women are such givers, and if we strategically place that giving, we can create our success. Thanks for watching. Go out there and have a great week, and I'll see you next time.